Promotion and relegation will never work in US soccer. Promotion and relegation is outdated and a scam. Very often we hear arguments against pro-rel, which is a very controversial topic in US soccer. A few weeks back, I gave the mic to someone that I mostly agree with. Someone for an open system with promotion relegation, something that I want for US soccer. Now today, I will be bringing two guests that are against promotion relegation in US soccer, Major League Soccer, USL, whatever. Hey, fair is fair, so we gotta hear both sides. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to today's episode, which is an anti-promotion relegation episode. Now listen, I will be pushing back on a lot of their points, but keep in mind, this is not a debate. In the future, perhaps I will try to get one of these episodes done with a moderator. I also made sure to bring two guests that are against me, so both of them can help each other elaborate a point, while I'll have no one to help me besides, the force, because the force is always with me. Both of these guests have no direct financial interest in MLS, therefore they truly simply believe that pro-rel ain't the way to go. And they are Paul from Simple Coach TV that covers third division soccer in the United States, and Daniel from Battered Herons, an Inter Miami podcast. I'll be putting their handles in the description of this video. All right, now sit back, relax, hit the like button because it's a great way to support the channel for free, and I won't be requesting it during the video. And if you want to support the channel financially, we do have a Patreon. The link is in the description of this video, but you don't really have to do so. And trust me, this is going to be a long episode, so if you have popcorn, go make it right now. It's going to be long, man. It's almost like a podcast, like a full hour. All right, roll the intro. Okay, everyone, a couple weeks ago, I had an episode where I brought someone that mostly agreed. Well, I agreed with him. Most, I would say 99% of the things he said. I am for an open system. However, since I'm open to an open system, I'm also open to open dialogue, to hearing everyone. And today I have two guests that they're not necessarily anti-pro-rel. It's not like they would go crazy and protest if MLS adopted it. I just believe they don't think it would work, and they're not really for it, I would say. But I'll let them talk. I'll let you go first, Paul, since you were the first one to even reach out to me and say, hey, I'm willing to go. I'm like, hey, that's wonderful. Paul, first, welcome to the channel for the first time. And then quickly tell us what your stance is. I'll let you talk.
Sure. Filippo, first of all, thank you. And Daniel, thanks for doing this. I really do appreciate it. I'm one who's always been into not so much the argument of soccer, but like the debates about it. That's sort of what drives me. So this is great that we're actually able to talk about this. So, what is my position? I always say, like, I am a 100% promotion and relegation guy. Like, I love the end of season anxiety that you feel when you're watching two relegation candidates battle it out in the last game of the season. I'm totally for that. My issue comes with, well, how would you implement it in the United States? And I came to this conclusion actually yesterday because I did a similar round table debate thing on Goals TV that I unfortunately think that as of everything I hear so far about an open system and what it would require and how we would do it, I'm coming to the conclusion that promotion and relegation is a relic of the past. And so if you look at the history of promotion and relegation, by and large, when were they started? Probably early 20th century is when the leagues that we're familiar with, that's when they really dove into promotion relegation. And there were two elements to it. The first was that they were merging multiple leagues together, and they were mostly regional, right? Regional leagues, they were, I call them sub-federations, right? You would have the main federation, but then you'd have these regional federations that organize their own little leagues. And over time, they started to merge and they started to have all these teams. But the second most important factor to promotion and relegation at the time, was that these, for the most part, were amateur clubs. And so we weren't talking about the scales of money that exist in the game today. And for me, and I have yet to hear a compelling argument of how to implement promotion and relegation in the 21st century when there is serious money on the line at a multitude of levels. So that just sort of summarizes
in any country or the U.S. specifically.
I'm talking specifically in the U.S. And actually, okay. You could look to Australia as an example of very similar to the U.S. and it failed for them as an experiment in the 80s. So,
but just to add to that, there's Australia as an example that didn't work, and then there's Japan as an example that did work, which started with. So there's both sides with that.
Sure. I'll agree about Japan, but Japan started from the outset from that point, whereas we, the United States, have a history of basically functioning as independent leagues, devoid of any sort of, again, promotion and relegation or interleague play. Mm-hmm. I think that's the historical realities that we face.
I'll give you a little bit of a picture of like what we talked about in the past of how it could possibly function. Obviously, it's not the absolute truth because it hasn't been tested, so it's a theory. But Daniel, on you.
Real quick to touch to his point, I think that if this was ever going to work in this country, it might have worked if it would have been introduced in that way in the late 90s, maybe after the first season or maybe in the inaugural season, maybe getting together a couple divisions. I think that the issue here is more the soccer culture in this country. It isn't big enough to support this type of system when you're trying to grow the fan base. I know that there's a lot of hardcore soccer fans or football fans in this country, but to grow this sport in this country, you need to get new fans. And unfortunately, I don't think that those fans are going to be rooting for second division teams. That's not what we're accustomed to here. For example, Miami FC here in Miami, it existed for about a decade before Inter Miami. That stadium was empty. There was no interest in Miami FC because it wasn't recognized as the major league team. Once Inter Miami came and got on board, all of a sudden it became very popular. Well, not very popular, but it became popular. It got people in the seats. Here, we're not accustomed to having those second divisions like Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA. There is no pro rel there. We're accustomed to teams having a shot to win the championship every year and not so much just, oh, let's go and try to make it into the next division or the next league. And I think that the culture here is what's really going to hinder any possibility of this helping the sport grow. So if you're asking, does this help the youth academies, the pay for play, the grassroots, things like that? Possibly. Does it help grow the sport to the casual fan that you're hoping to get to start watching soccer? I don't think that that's going to help at all. And I think that that's where my biggest stance is the fact that I think the casual fan that you're trying to get to start watching the MLS so that it can grow in this country, I don't think that they're going to be attracted to watching a second division team that's their local team. I think they're more attracted to the major league teams because that's just the culture down here.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think the culture of only watching the major league teams has anything to do with the fact that the minor league team can never get to the major league?
No, I think that it's just that's where the biggest names and the best players are. For example, I hear, because I talk to a lot of people, obviously, that love soccer across the pond in the EPL, La Liga, and they all say that an MLS team would never survive in the second division in England or in the second division in Spain, that they wouldn't survive in those because the talent level is that large of disparity. So I think that it would hinder us to say that we are now going ahead and we're opening up to even lower talent to move up to the major leagues. Everybody talks about the lack of quality in the MLS when they're fans of other places around around the world. And I think that if you start doing the whole pro rel thing, I think it makes it more difficult to have the casual fan come and watch because, like I said, the soccer culture here is targeted towards the major league teams.
Yeah. I don't buy into like people not watching MLS due to quality. I don't really buy into that narrative. I think that they just don't want to watch it. There's a different reason because I watch a lot of MLS. I don't think quality. I mean, obviously, it's not the best.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
But I don't think the quality is unwatchable. That is,
I'm with you.
I'm very
So I
critical of
agree.
MLS, but I don't think it's anywhere close to unwatchable. Now, the Tampa Bay Rowdies here, I went to a game 2 weeks ago in St. Petersburg here in Florida. They put 7,000 people in the stadium. The USL game that was on CBS the other day, it obviously doesn't take into account the Apple TV numbers, but it got more views than El Tráfico on Fox. It got 300 and something thousand people watching the USL game.
I saw something about that.
Yeah, so there, I do think that soccer culture in the US is a bit different than other sports culture. There's a lot of immigrants involved in that too. A lot of immigration that happened in the United States that bring that culture. It has never been tested. And I have let me move on. Otherwise, it's going to become a show of me talking. I want you guys to talk more, and I will present points to push back on it. Otherwise, I don't shut up, dude. I don't shut up. So Paul, I'm going to go back to you.
I don't have the mute button for you, unfortunately.
Yeah, you'll start muting me.
Yeah.
Let me mute myself. So, yeah. Paul, another question for you. What I wanted to ask you this is, and I, to a certain extent, I agree with what Daniel was saying to a certain extent, and I'll explain why. I think that a closed system was justified for a period of time because you needed to lift off U.S. soccer. And I mean, I was born in the mid-90s, so I wouldn't know what soccer was in the U.S. in the 90s, but just from my lifetime, it's grown tremendously. And then anyone that experienced it in the 90s, I'm assuming it's been even crazier, the growth. There's a much bigger soccer culture in this country than ever before. Do you guys think, and I'll start with you, Paul, that the closed system will actually get soccer to maximize its potential in this country? Do you think that an open system, opening it, because an issue I have right now, and I'm talking a lot, but I want you to try to picture what I'm saying. Nowadays, if you live in a state or city that doesn't have an MLS team, your access or pathway to becoming a professional soccer player is very complicated. It's very complicated in the United States. You can go play in college, there's that, but you know that for professional level, you have to be tremendous. There's not most college players don't become pro soccer players here at a high level, right? High level, I mean MLS above. So it's not accessible to all in a massive country that we live in. Do you see that as an issue? Do you think that having a closed system will just hold us back in that sense? Because there's multiple states and multiple areas that are not touched by MLS. Not by MLS's fault. It's just that they have a certain amount of teams. They're not going to be everywhere.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to say, probably this is where I'm going to diverge from you a little bit, is I think in the United States, if you are a talented enough soccer player, no matter where you play, right, you will be found. All right. Do I think we could do better in terms of identifying players and taking risks on players that may or may not pan out? Yeah, I think so. I think again, one of the gripes that I have about Major League Soccer is that they're very risk averse. I understand that, but so they're not going to gamble on somebody unless they think they're going to get some reward from them. The question is, do we have the I'll reverse it. Do we have the talent to demand that we give better pathways to the players that we have? And that's an honest question. I don't know the real answer to it. I suspect, but to me, I look at again, numbers are sort of I'd look at for some weird reason. But I'm going to say, I bet you in a given year, 50 of the best players in the United States are probably at a different level than the next 50, right?
Can I say one thing to that real quick?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example from my own experience here in Orlando. You pretty much, if you have a pathway, it's Orlando City. And I've worked with their first soccer school here that was meant to supply the academy. And I've had kids at a certain age where you have nowhere to send because Orlando City's like, well, we don't have this age group. And then I'm like, well, lucky for us, there's no competition here from any other academy. So it's either Orlando City or you go kick on the park with your dad, or go play in a club where you're coached by amateur coaches or not coaches that are as good as Orlando City. And I'll give another example. I interviewed Caden Clark a year or 2 years ago, I think. He's from Minnesota. And for example, Minnesota United didn't have his age group in the academy at the time. So his dad, lucky for him, had money to pay for him to go to the Barcelona residency academy. He was developed and all that. So I don't think that MLS on its own can scout and get every talent, not just in the United States, but not even in their own cities.
Well, that's the issue I think that is worth addressing, right? Like, why don't MLS teams have a U10 team to bring on these kids, right? Like, I get that, the age groups, I get that. But what I'm saying is that there are avenues for all kids of all ages to get to the level in which they are going to reach, right?
Even
so
low
like
income?
I said, even I'm going to say this, even low income, right? Because not every youth club is an academy that charges $3,500 a year, right? There are options at every level. And again, I'm not saying that's perfect, right? I'm not saying, oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, that you can pay a lot or pay a little and you can still play. But I think for too long we've talked about youth soccer as if the only way to play was if you paid gobs of money. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there's plenty of examples you can go around and find places to play. Now that doesn't address the issue of the top 50 players, right? But I guess the broader point what I was trying to make was let's just say the number is 50, my guesstimate on how many really talented professional soccer players that could come about in any given year. It's 50. 50 of those kids can go play somewhere in England and third division in Spain. Let's just say that number is that ballpark. My question is that number actually 100 or 150? I don't think so. I think the best of the best players get identified or find a way to make their way overseas and find locations for. I don't see that as being the biggest issue that we confront, especially in the youth soccer and identifying talent area.
Yeah, just the thing where I disagree there, and then I'll pass it to Daniel too, is just that the more professional clubs you can have, even if they have less resources, the more ground you cover with soccer in this country, the more access to talent you'll have. Because even if you live in a big city, like for example, Houston, you can literally have access to the Dynamo, but live an hour and a half away because of how big the city is.
Sure.
And then if you have more opportunities of lower division clubs, sometimes you can work your way up there rather than your parents just come up to you and say, unfortunately, kiddo, I can't take you because I got to go to work and you can't do this. There's an element to having an open system where you just make the sport more accessible. Sure, you dilute the MLS teams might have less money because of that. That is true. That is a very strong possibility because you have to dilute it in a certain way, but you do cover more ground. And I think you grow the soccer culture and pyramid in a more organic way than MLS.
But see, this is where I think we're going to start to split, right? I think you're talking specifically about what happens on the soccer field, right? And we could have a debate about that. I love that side. More interesting to me is like, how do you get kids in and how do you train them and how do you do all these things to make them professional soccer players? I think I'm talking a little bit more broadly about sort of how this overall structure works or materializes or becomes a reality. And that to me is sort of what I've been thinking about is how do you actually implement some of these things, especially around an open system and pro rel, that I just don't find realistic, or I haven't heard a compelling enough argument to be like, yeah, I can buy into that. Right. So that's where
I guess the most compelling argument I could pose, like comparing it to other countries, but I don't have to say that because you know
right.
how most of them work, so I don't have
Correct.
to go through it. Daniel, the same question to you. Do you want me to quickly repeat it? Because I know me and Paul started talking about.
No,
I'll repeat it. Okay, the question was more or less, let's say I agree with you that the closed system was required to lift soccer in the country because, like you said, culture. We didn't have a professional league. It started after the '94 World Cup. And then the closed system was more to protect the investors and keep it going.
Mhm.
and MLS almost folded.
The
And
Fusion and was it the
well,
Tampa Bay?
yeah,
Tampa
and
Bay.
MLS.
Yeah.
There's a case to be made about MLS has been subsidized for years through some and the U.S. Soccer Federation. Something it's worth mentioning because this closed system could have collapsed or could have
Yep.
struggled a lot more without the subsidies, the way things work. But my question is, once again, do you think the path? I know you and Paul have similar opinions in that, but do you think that U.S. soccer will reach its potential maintaining this closed system? It was required till now, and it's required to keep this way. Or do you think 20, 30, 40 years from now, or even 10, whatever, the open system will be okay? Now that we have a culture, now that it's grown, this is how it maximizes the potential.
I really don't want to give you the cliche anti-pro reg debate, but like everybody says, when these owners bought into Major League Soccer, they bought into Major League Soccer. So I think that 10, 20 years, because the price that it's taken right now to buy into a MLS right now it's astronomical, and it's going to keep going up. So if they start buying into Major League Soccer, I think it's going to get harder and harder to implement that type of system where you start telling them that they're going to be in a league where you can get relegated, and all of a sudden things may change, especially with the the sports culture here, where people might not be as interested. When you think about American sports culture, and I might be going off on a tangent here, but when you think about American sports culture, when you think about an NFL team, there's only 9 home games sometimes. And if the team is out of it or they're not doing well, you have probably the last 2 home games of the season, even though there's only 9 all year, they might be half empty. If you take that same team and you put them in the second division, they're going to have that same, like those hardcore supporters going. But a lot of the casual fan bases that you count on going and filling up those stadiums, they're not going to show up for those second division games. I think for MLS to capitalize, they need to keep it the way it is, because that's going to help get more casual fans. If I know that a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's so fun. It's so horrible how 9 teams in each conference get into the playoffs. It's basically a joke. Everybody gets in." But that's how you keep this fan base interested. If you tell them that they have absolutely no hope year after year, unfortunately, the way that the playoff system works in this country, I think that that's what keeps people engaged, knowing that they still have a chance later on in the year and that they might get in. They might have that Cinderella run. And I know for those world soccer fans, it's silly to say, but it's very common here. Like people love brackets, people love playoff systems, and that's what you kind of get here with the MLS. And I think when you talk about relegation and promotion, nobody's really excited to, let's hope that we don't fall to the second division. I think they're more excited let's go get that 9th or 8th seed and get into the playoffs and let's see what happens. I think that the issue here with ProRec is the culture here for sports and the fans that you're trying to gain right now more than anything else. And to what you guys were talking about, the grassroots and the development of players, I do think that having more pro clubs and promotion relegation, that does help those scenarios. But my thing is talking about growing the fan base and the sport as a whole in this country. I think that that's where that gets lost. I don't think that in that aspect it'll work.
Yeah, the owner's part, I'm just going to say it. The owner's opinion is not really relevant because the federation, the thing is,
the shareholders
has to come from the federation. And if the federation comes tomorrow and says, we're doing promotion relegation, otherwise you're not, and if you're not MLS, if you're not with us, you're not going to be the Division I sanctioned league, it just ruins the whole thing. Obviously, they wouldn't do that because I don't want them to do that either. I think if promotion relegation is ever to be implemented, you have to work with MLS. You can't just go and impose it. That would be a catastrophe for U.S. soccer. Mm-hmm. You can't just impose it. It has to be worked. But one thing to say, too, about what did you say again? Talked about lower division. I still think that soccer is a bit different. And you see that with some USL teams. And a lot of the MLS teams came from USL. There's quite a few that we could name, including Orlando here, that played in USL.
Cincinnati also, yeah.
And I mean, like I said, like the Tampa Bay Rowdies have support here. Lou City has support there, too. We saw that when they were in CBS. So I think it's a bit different when it comes to soccer. And very often MLS, a lot of people, I don't know about Paul on this one. You clearly are interested, but I don't know about Paul on this one. It's I feel like the regular season MLS, there's a point where it becomes very boring and it's very hard to care. There are teams that just don't have anything to fight for at one point, and the top and the bottom. And like, sure, the last game when they're fighting for that playoff spot is exciting, sure. But again, it's like promotion relegation, like Paul was saying, it's exciting too to watch the promotion relegation battle in the last round. It's kind of like falls in that same category in terms of like fighting for it.
I think that a lot, and I know you watch the Brazilian league, Paul. I'm not sure if you watch any other leagues, but for example, a lot of people that I have the debate about pro or reg, when I have that debate, it's usually with a lot of EPL fans, and they tell me how much they love it. But then you ask them what's their favorite team. It's Manchester City, it's Liverpool, it's teams that will never get relegated.
Well, I mean,
like they don't appreciate the relegation battle because they've never experienced it. Well, like I said, you may be different.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Palmeiras fan, which if you look now, they're winning a lot of trophies.
Filippo, we forgive you.
They got relegated. They got relegated twice in my life, actually, believe it or not. In 2002, and I think it was 2012, or I don't remember. They got relegated twice in my life. Everyone sticked around. I understand culture.
It's
Brazil, they're not going to abandon the team,
right?
But I don't know, man. I go to the Orlando City games. Inter Miami, not so much. I went to the game, and it seemed like there were more Messi fans than Miami fans. But that's a different discussion.
It's true. Yeah. Messi fans have taken over.
I go to Orlando games, and I get the sense with the people I interact with, the people I know, if Orlando City got relegated, I don't think these people would abandon the team. Would the attendance go down? Sure. But again, that's just speculative. That's not really relevant for the debate because it's a could or not.
But I do think that it has some relevancy because I think in other countries, Brazil, for example, the most popular sport is soccer. I don't know if there's a second most popular sport. In this country, NFL is king. Then you have the NBA. Then you have MLB, which I think is falling down. MLS will soon overtake it. You have the NHL. You have so many other options. MLB. I think it will. MLB's dying.
MLS has to overtake Liga MX in the Premier League before they think about taking MLB. It's not even
you're talking about viewership. You're talking about viewership here in the country. Okay.
Well, even games. If you put Premier League games here, they're going to put more people in the stadium.
Well, I have a feeling that the Premier League might have passed the NHL already here in this country, but that's a story for another day.
I meant maybe, but I'm just saying that MLS, before they talk about MLB or anything, they have to be the number one soccer league in the United States, which they're the first division. They're not the most watched.
Well, and actually, and to that, this is another thing that I've talked about on my show is that I feel like the MLS. A lot of people are saying that they're competing against Liga MX and competing against the EPL. I think they're competing against the other American sports leagues. I think they want to be recognized as the fourth biggest sports league. I don't think they're worried about being recognized as the biggest soccer league here in the North America over Liga MX. I think they're more concerned about being recognized as, hey, whenever ESPN is on and it's like, oh, this person broke the record for being the person that's won the most games in the four major sports leagues. They literally always say four major sports league. They never include the MLS in there. I think the MLS wants to be in that conversation. I don't think they're so much worried as competing with the EPL and the Liga MX or anything like that. That's what I believe. I believe that they want to be recognized as a top league in this country because that's how you start getting more. That means that you've gotten more fans when you start being recognized as that fifth league.
I know, but there's a lot of fans that watch Premier League and all those that are already soccer fans that don't feel included. But that's a different discussion because I want to go back to Paul here. Paul, I want to give you the mic here because I want you to make a compelling argument to why promotion relegation should not be tried in the United States. And I'll let you talk for as long as you want. I want you to just freestyle on it. Before you start, I want to add some points for you to counter in the process. Okay. But again, you can also ignore what I'm about to say and just freestyle. I want you to go. So MLS. One of the things about closed system is they talk about stability, which to a certain extent I agree. But we had the NASL in the 70s, 80s where Pele played with the Cosmos. That was a closed system, and that league folded, right? We all know the history, multiple reasons, and anyhow, we come into MLS, a closed system. MLS almost folded as a whole. MLS has been subsidized for multiple years by the U.S. Soccer Federation through Soccer United Marketing. And some people could even argue that now it's being a little bit subsidized by Soccer United Marketing through Liga MX and Mexico too. That one I'm not going to really, I guess, endorse because I don't have enough evidence to that. But U.S. Soccer Federation, we know how it is. So my question to you is, clearly it's not as stable as people think. It could have folded by now without all of that. But it hasn't because it was kept alive a little bit artificially. Franchise fees help quite a bit, franchise fees. So my question to you, Paul, is this. Convince me right now. You probably won't because I'm very stubborn, but convince me right now. Promotion relegation should not be implemented in this country. Why?
Well, I'm going to say you're going to be disappointed because I don't think there's not avenues to pursue promotion and relegation, right? Like there's ways in which I think would be creative ways. I think probably the easiest place to start, believe it or not, is in youth soccer. I keep thinking we should return all the clubs back to the states, the state federations, have them run a single league that has the multiple divisions.
Agree.
Right? Okay. So, and then you regionalize tournaments between like the team, and you could still do other tournaments and stuff like that. But I think fundamentally the league. So I think that's a point. Let me just
I'm on
talk
board
about
on that. Okay, just to make
yeah. I'm a big fan of that idea. Let me just talk about stability because you raised the NASL, and actually the first article I ever wrote was actually a treatise on the NASL. First of all, the NASL is a little bit of a smoke and mirrors because everybody thinks that the success of the NASL, or the relative success of the NASL, was this league-wide thing. And the truth be told is that it was only 5 years of the cosmos that sort of made NASL what it is today. And that's when Beckenbauer and Pele and all those Cruyff and all those guys were there, and that they were selling out Giant Stadium at the time for multiple times in a season. Everybody else was squandering on the with attendance hovering around 10,000 and trying to compete with the Cosmos in hiring players. And then you add to that over expansion, where you were bringing in people who didn't necessarily have the financial wherewithal. The league crumbled under its own weight. So I'll that. I guess I'm a little confused because you're not the first one, Filippo, that said this, and I guess I just need to understand more. And everyone has said that this is, MLS has been propped up by U.S. soccer, whether that's through some or the relationship through some. Some is an entity unto itself that, yeah, it does sports marketing. That's its thing. And it started because nobody wanted to buy TV rights to the World Cup in 2002, 2006, right? And so they started a company to buy those rights and sell those rights. And then after that, they bought out IMG, who was the marketing arm of U.S. soccer, and bought them out of their contract out of 2 years, and in turn guaranteed the federation $30 million a year. So, and I think part and parcel of that was because, yes, I do agree that there were rules that were made specifically to support MLS. I think, and I cannot confirm because can't find any articles on it, but I think U.S. soccer was an original investor into MLS, right? So when they were collecting money, $5 million from everybody, U.S. soccer ponied up $5 million. Although, I'm not too sure, so I could misspeak. But, actually, I think everybody should be, to a certain extent, I think everybody should be glad Some is around, because they were able to make a business out of the notion of soccer, and is actually make something like MLS financially viable until, I would say, it probably continues, right? Because I still think the clubs lose money. I think MLS probably breaks even, but Some is the big, right? And those are all investors from MLS, right? So MLS investors own Some. I don't know how that's a prop up or how U.S. soccer does. I would just need clarity on that.
Conflict of interest too, right?
Well, sure, we can talk. I'm okay with that. Yeah,
and
I'm okay with that. Like
the U.S. men's national team, women's national team into the Some contract, influence, all of that. You remember that they didn't allow. There's a lawsuit. I mean, news came out today even that FIFA is going to allow other leagues in the world play in the United States, which I find it weird, but I'm not against it.
No, I'm totally against it. I think that's a terrible idea. Not so much for U.S. soccer and what it does to U.S. soccer, but I'd be enraged if I were if I were a socio del Barça, like I used to be, and they're telling me that they're a game that I am eligible to go see and is supposed to be in the Camp Nou, they're now telling me it's going to be in Giant Stadium in the United States. That would make me pissed.
I would be the same if I'm living in São Paulo, Brazil. But my question to you is: should it be prohibited, or should it be the fans?
I think it should. I think the league games. You want to do friendlies all you want, go ahead. But I think league games should stay in place, right? In the country in which they're being played. Unless something changes in the league so I think there's mechanisms for teams to travel, to go play elsewhere. So that's just my
that
take.
one
Again,
becomes just an opinion on it. I agree with you that I wouldn't like it. I'm just saying it shouldn't be prohibited.
I just think, then what's the limit, right? Then what's the limit to that? There's no, once you do it once, you cannot stop it. And so, hey, if I'm Liverpool, wouldn't it be great if I did a whole season in the United States, played all my games, my home games in the United States?
I mean,
right? That becomes viable, and I think that's a dangerous precedent.
It is, because the thing is, then you come with like the backlash of the fans, just like the Super League, right?
Correct.
The Super League to me is not a smart thing to do, the Super League, but the fans, I think it didn't happen because of the pushback of the fans there. I think that played a massive role at the time.
Correct.
But again, I'll let you go.
Let me keep going. So, and then you talked about MLS almost folded. MLS almost folded, and I wouldn't say that U.S. Soccer kept them alive. I would actually say Lamar Hunt and Phil Anschutz kept them alive.
No, I didn't say U.S. Soccer kept them alive.
Oh, I thought that's what you
said. It played.
So,
they helped, but no, it wasn't U.S. Soccer. No.
But it was Phil Anschutz and Lamar Hunt and Robert Kraft, for as much crap as he gets. Those three guys pretty much kept the league afloat until they started to do some expansion and get some money.
David Beckham.
And David Beckham and all that stuff started to flow, right? And so so there's that. I'm just going to say from again, and this is, I'm not opposed to promotion and relegation. I just don't see how you do this, which a lot of guys, and you mentioned some of them, Filippo, that are just kind of like, you're brain dead, like want to flip a switch and say, tomorrow we're going to do promotion and relegation and kick MLS out. There are so many financial intricacies, so many issues with that I just can't be on board. Like I said, start at the youth clubs, organize youth soccer where where U.S. Soccer probably has the biggest influence. Have them organize at each state level, sort of a traditional soccer looking league format with promotion and relegation at that league. First few years are going to be ugly because really good teams are going to play really crappy teams, but it'll sort of even out over time. And you start there, right? That to me is an easy one. I think if I were, I'll just throw this because I thought about this the other day. If I were MLS and I would be like, hey, why don't we experiment with something, which they won't because they're so risk averse, but I would do an anti-tournament. So I would pare down the number of teams that make the MLS Cup tournament to, let's say, 10. And then I would take the bottom 8 teams, or pick a number, and create an anti-tournament. And your objective is to win out of the tournament. So you're going to get an extra game at the end of the season. You're going to play in a tournament that if you keep losing, you go to a final. And the loser of that tournament is the last place team. And next season, they have to do something stupid like wear a scarlet letter on their shirt, a big arrow pointing down or something that says, we're the worst team in MLS. They would never do something like that. But basically, you highlight the winner and you highlight the team that is the absolute worst, right? And Filippo, I would suspect, and Daniel, you as well, right? If you're competitors, that would shame you, right? That would shame you to wear something like that, to end up in there. And I think you kick up the competition a little bit.
So, Paul,
I will agree. Middle of the season, and I don't know if it's the summer and it's hot and all this stuff, but I do agree. Like, something has to be to spice up the league.
Let me go with what you mentioned of youth soccer, because I love that idea. I love it, and I also think youth soccer has to be more local, so people are not traveling across the country. Less money spent by the teams, parents. It should remain local. So you're spot on that one. How promotion relegation could be implemented in this country? First, as you said, you can't just flip a switch and start it next season. Right. It would be a very slow process, a little painful, just like you said for the youth one. And you would have to get everyone on board. It would be the only way to get U.S. Soccer to move together in the same direction, because now it's all fragmented. It's really hard to get anything done in the United States and try to implement anything from the federation, state associations, whatever you try to do. it would have to be something. You have to still split the conferences. You're probably going to need to have Division 1, 2, and 3 in each conference. You're going to have to do it that way. And you're going to need to have regional tournaments with really small clubs, some of them even probably amateur level, like very small clubs, which winning those regional tournaments or state tournaments, maybe state would be better so they don't have to travel too much. That's how you get into the first division of the state level. And then from the first division to the state level, if you get X position, whatever, you can move on to the third division of the national level. And that's how you move up. Just for anyone that wants to look this up, it would be something similar to the Brazilian pyramid open system, because Brazil is also a big country. So you try to do a lot of things at the state level. And anyone that follows Brazilian soccer, state tournaments at the youth and professional level are a big deal. And I think the United States would have to be something like that because we're too big of a country in terms of size. So my question to you, if it's implemented in that way, slowly over time, let's say even across 8 years, slowly, you start to introduce it, start to open it, you get the owners of MLS on board for whatever reason. Let's say MLS stagnated and they're like, crap, stagnating, things are not going, I need to change something. Is there any scenario where you think that doesn't work? Like where
I still think you don't find you haven't sorted out. And again, this is a part where I diverge from Promotion and Relegation, which is you still haven't sorted out the financial picture, right? So again, I'm just taking what other people say, right? Like the whole notion of solidarity payments and parachute payments and these mechanisms by which, if you're relegated, you're given some sort of financial benefit to soften the blow. And right. And so that we're not talking $100,000. We're talking millions upon millions of dollars if this is going to be made to work. And so where are you going to get that from? Do you get it from US soccer? Or do you get it from Major League Soccer? Or do you get it from the only other place where there might be any money is in the youth soccer development world, right? And how do you extract that money? And I would just say, like, you can't, unfortunately, the world we live in, it would have to be a willing participation by somebody like Major League Soccer to basically take a percentage of the money that they earn to distribute among these clubs that may or may not be that get relegated in the process, right? And outside of that, like, you want to try that, get everybody to just move up and down. Sure, good luck with that. I just think there are real serious, especially now. I'm just, again, modern soccer, modern day, what the world looks like today. There are serious ramifications for clubs that get relegated, and I would argue that probably a lot of them in England and in Spain that get relegated suffer a serious backlash financially because they're now in the second division as opposed to the first.
And for every hit one takes getting relegated, one gains getting promoted, right? Someone gets a boost.
Do they survive? That's the
some do,
point,
some
right?
Don't, right? It depends.
Right. So you're going to have this. You might end up having a open system, great, but you're just going to have a cycle of teams that come through that, boom or bust, right? Like, they're either going to hit it or they're going to fade out. And is that healthy? I don't necessarily think that that's a healthy way of doing it. And I would add one last thing, because I just thought of this, and because I mentioned it in the past. But the other issue that I think that we forget is that pretty much everywhere in the world, for the most part, barring few locations, has an outside framework by which, if things go wrong within the sport of soccer that go outside of the world of soccer, so it's the financials or it's player transfers and all that kind of stuff, there are outside entities that have nothing to do with the sport that can adjudicate and fix things on behalf of the sport, and then turn around and give it back to the sport, right? So if a club fails in England, Samus goes into administration. That person, the people do whatever they need to do to clean the books. They turn around, they find a new buyer. Boom, here's the club again. We don't at any level do we have that. So I made this case. If Major League Soccer suddenly something happens that Major League Soccer is at risk of closing its doors, and everybody, all the money people walk away for whatever the reason is, we don't have a mechanism to stop that. Like, we don't have somebody to go in and clean up MLS and then turn it around and be like, okay, here it is in better shape. We don't have it. MLS will go out of business. All the clubs will disappear. Right. And I think that's, we have to be realistic about some of the liabilities of the ledger. So, right.
But again, the whole thing with you were talking about the owners again, because MLS is about the stakeholders, the owners,
Right.
and they obviously they're not gonna. Why would I do solidarity payments? Sure, I can suck here for 10 years and I'll keep that money. Why would I do that? Or I can get relegated. But there is this possibility. Well, not right now. The way the federation is, the federation can. Forget the owners for a second, because they don't have a say. They don't own soccer in this country. The owners,
right? No, I
they
agree.
own MLS, and then the commitment without having promotion relegation, as far as I know, is MLS with the owners, not the federation. Right? The federation allowed MLS to be like that, but as far as I know, they're the governing body or the government of soccer in the United States through FIFA, CONCACAF, and if FIFA tomorrow just comes to the U.S. Soccer Federation and says, look, you need to implement promotion relegation. It needs to be open. Figure it out. Whatever. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen to the U.S.
But I'm not sure that's even doable. Even if FIFA does come in, hypothetical, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not. U.S. Soccer's
they can take
mandate,
the D1 sanction regardless of legality. They can do it. They can take the D1 sanction.
Sure. U.S. Soccer has very limited powers for managing soccer. Their only real legal organizing principle is around the Olympic teams and by default the national teams, right? That's sort of the scope of what they're allowed to do. They can come up with sanctioning criteria. So if you want to be sanctioned by U.S. Soccer, yes, here is the criteria. If you don't, you can go. But if FIFA said, we want you to implement promotion and relegation, U.S. Soccer, I don't think, has a leg to stand on to go to MLS and say, you have to abide by these new promotion and relegation rules. We're totally off of far field.
They can't do that to MLS. No, they can't. You're right. They can't do that. But what they can do is, if you don't do it and they remove the Division I sanction, that means MLS players, MLS players can't play in the World Cup, and they can't play in CONCACAF
and so you basically,
so they all leave.
No, they'll all leave, and you'll kill Major League Soccer.
No, that's why I said I don't want that to happen.
Right.
I think it has to be something where it's like MLS has to work together. But then the one question for this year is, we just had the Open Cup saga, which in my opinion MLS should be playing. Like they should have a commitment to play with that. But it doesn't look like the governing body of soccer in this country has much of a say. MLS kind of did whatever they wanted. Oh, sure, they have, I think 8 teams are playing. They still sent the MLS Next Pro teams that are not playing that well at the moment, which is expected. They're mostly U20s.
Playing big boys, yeah.
Yeah, so it's somewhat expected, but it shouldn't be them playing. It should be MLS teams playing in the Open Cup. Do you think that happens in an open system? Just yes or no for both of you. I think no. I think there's no way that happens.
I don't think so either. I mean,
I don't think it should have happened, period. But
yes.
Yeah, no.
So my issue with all of it, like when we talk about,
I don't think it's a condition of a closed system. I think it's a condition of the fact that MLS is a separate business entity, just like USL is, and there's more advantages for USL to participate in the US Open Cup than Major League Soccer. For whether I agree with that or not is a different story. But I mean,
but at that point, there's a relationship between the other divisions, and that's why I think they would be more open to it.
Well, but here's the thing. The thing with MLS is, I agree that they're a business and they should look and seek for what's best interest of them. But there is also, a fine line where you don't cross, where they also, because they're a Division I sanctioned league, they also do have a commitment, a moral responsibility with soccer in the United States of America. They do have that. I understand it's a business, and that's why when MLS makes some decisions about money, I sometimes even defend them. I say, look, they're a business. They have to do it. But again, there's also a moral obligation with soccer in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Open Cup is part of that, them liking it or not. I think they should have done a better job in the past marketing the Open Cup. That's another thing that could be talked about here, which they didn't ever seem to be interested, and they continue to not be interested. But it wouldn't happen. So don't you fear that this closed system over time will just give MLS more and more power? Is there no fear from both of you that this could be an issue? Because MLS is getting stronger and stronger, and there are benefits to U.S. soccer with that, because better facilities, developing better players. We have a better national team a lot because of MLS, even if you remove the dual nationals that we got abroad. Do you guys not fear that power just grows, that MLS will become bigger than the federation at one point, if they're not already?
Daniel, I'll let you go first.
No, mine's is quick. I'm an NFL fan. I'm an NBA fan. I'm accustomed to this, so it doesn't bother me at all to have one major league running things.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it affects the youth, but
mm-hmm. So I'll say this. I said it publicly. I think the U.S. soccer's response to Major League Soccer was atrocious. I think Major League Soccer's decision was atrocious. I thought Cindy Parlow-Cohn's leadership in this regard, which, again, I'm not sure how much she would have had to do, but she could at least spoken on the subject or had somebody speak on the subject. I think the fact that she was silent, or U.S. soccer was relatively silent, was atrocious. I think Don Garber, for as much good as I think he has done, has demonstrated something to me, which I think is very concerning, and that is that he does not understand the global nature of the game, right? He understands the finances of running a league, but he doesn't understand that. You're right, and I totally agree with you that the sport of soccer demands something different from its professional teams, and I think that is participation in the U.S. Open Cup. And I said it before, and I even said, which, you know, I didn't get much crap for it, probably because I wasn't as vocal about it. I thought this is something that Don Garber should resign for, and we should look for somebody who is a little bit more understanding of what it means to be the leading professional league in the United States, and what that means as it impacts USL and youth soccer and all of those things. But again, that's just me. You know, Don Garber has 62 or 63 bosses that he has to answer to. So I'm sure they have a different thing to say. So that's just my take.
Yeah, I just want to go back to one question you asked me that I didn't fully answer when I was at how does it work with the parachute payment or the solidarity payment? Sorry. It would have to come organized through the federation, and yes, it would be TV revenue from MLS, and it would have to trickle down, and that's how the pyramid works. And I mean, anyone that's interested, I'm not saying it would be the exact same, but I guess you kind of look into how it's done in England, and you'll kind of get a picture of how I'm explaining it, because essentially the pyramid is subsidized through the Premier League. Do the other ones make money? Yes, but it's through the Premier League.
But also, let's be clear about something. Just to want it in the United States, just to want that mechanism to happen, doesn't amount to a hill of beans. In England, the Premier League was essentially forced because, and actually to up the money, because I always think they contributed. Because the lower divisions were financially struggling. I say lower divisions, the clubs, because it operates different. It's an open system. So the clubs were under financial duress across England, right? And again, one of the different things, a lot of these clubs have municipal ties, right? So financial ties to municipalities. And so the idea was that the Premier League, that had these ginormous contracts, could subsidize to one degree or another the rest of those teams, so that at least they could stay in business, and that these municipalities don't end up with stadiums and without teams or anything like that. So there's a history to that as well. So, but anyhow, I just ran on a tangent.
And good for that, because then then we have Wrexham, and we have lots of TV shows.
Sure. Again, and look at Wrexham, right? Like Wrexham,
they got a big investor.
Yeah, they did get a big investor, but who owns the stadium, right? Like the stadium is owned by the city of Wrexham, right? And always has been. And so that's why the new owners, the two guys, own the team, because the old owner wanted to own the stadium and then wanted to convert the stadium to like condos or whatever they do in Wrexham-ish way. So anyhow, we can go down that path another time.
Yeah. Before we close here, Two things. One, I've been meaning to ask this the whole episode, Paul. What's that Barcelona jersey back there, and who signed it?
So I think that's the 2008 Barcelona team. So it does have Messi, Xavi, Iniesta. It's 2008, 2009, I think is what the season was. It's the whole squad up front. So that's why it's there.
Got to be worth a lot. And then the second thing before you close, do you all have any closing statements? It could be just saying bye to everyone, or it could be something in regards to the topic.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you think that bringing Pro Rel into the MLS or into the United States, it would help grow the fan base?
I think so. I think it'll be slow.
So?
I think it'll be a bit more organic than paying 400 million, 300 million and opening a franchise in the city. I do agree with you of the sports culture in the United States. That's why when I talk about Pro Rel, I totally understand the questioning that some things are asked about. And I understand the whole culture. That's why I'm not just telling everyone, flip a switch, start it tomorrow, just do it. I am for it. I think it would. I think it should have been done in the 90s. Originally, the idea with U.S. soccer before MLS was to have Pro Rel, but then the guy in charge wasn't reelected. That was like in 1990. Then he wasn't reelected, and as he wasn't reelected, the MLS plan ended up coming along, and I actually believe to a certain degree that the closed system was important for a long time to give stability, because I don't think it was as stable as it could be today. But I do think there's enough soccer fans in the United States in lower leagues and upper leagues, and I think some communities would embrace it. Would it be tough? Would it have to be very well planned, very well managed, and the federation would have to be highly involved and competent, which I don't think they are. So that's a big concern of mine. I don't think the federation is competent. I think MLS is very competent with what they do. I honestly do, truly do. I think MLS and what they do, they're competent. Are they perfect? No, not that. But I think they're far more competent than the federation. So that would be my main concern. But I do think it would, yes, over the long run.
I think a lot of people here in this country that are casual sports fans really are into the whole last to first. Like the NFL is very popular. You take the last seed Cincinnati Bengals one year and they're in the Super Bowl the next year. With relegation, that's not possible because they'd be in another league completely the next year. Inter Miami, for example, if we were relegating, Inter Miami wouldn't be in the MLS this year. So Messi would be playing in the second division. And I know you might say that Messi might have got him to the.
I would have loved that.
But MLS itself wouldn't have, because you wouldn't want him playing.
Wait, you guys watch NFL a lot? I have a question. Is there any team in NFL that has always sucked? They
Yes.
barely make the which one? The Jets.
Right,
Do
the
they
New
still
York
have
Jets.
fans? Do they still have fans?
Yes. They do.
Okay, so there you go. So if they get relegated, they suck and they still have fans.
There's a difference, though. The New York Jets have been around for over 50, 60 years. The league as a whole hasn't been around that long. They don't have.
But clearly, our culture still supports it, regardless.
Because you were born into it. And now I agree that eventually the MLS might get there, but it won't be anytime soon. Like when my wife is pregnant, she's gonna have a baby. That baby.
Congratulations! How awesome!
Thank you. It'll be born a Jets fan, a Yankees fan, an Inter. Like it has several teams to be that a hardcore fan of. In this country, you have 4 or 5 teams that you really love. You might have that one that's above the rest, but your love is shared across sports. In other countries, it's Palmeiras. That's my team, and I'm going to die for them. In England, Manchester United, they bleed for that team. Here, you might see a Dolphins fan. That's great, but he might also like the Miami Heat. And when the Dolphins are doing poorly, instead of spending my money on the Dolphins game, well, they're doing like crap anyway. I'm going to go spend my money at the Heat game. It's different here. And I think that needs to be taken into account also, because I don't think people talk about the fact that there's so many options here and so much love to be spread in the sports world. Cincinnati, the Cincinnati FC or CF, whatever they call themselves.
Cincinnati, yeah.
2022, they were last place. They would have gotten relegated. The very next year, they made it to the semifinals of the Eastern Conference. They almost beat Philadelphia
for the first like 3 seasons.
I know. But then they jumped up and they almost made it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
So wait. I think you just made a point for me, though, Paul. I think he just made a point for me. We were about to leave, but I think he just reinforced, because you just told me that these teams that are 50 years old, the fans are loyal. They're growing into it. They're not abandoned. And I lived in Buffalo because I went to school there. I can assure you, relegate the Buffalo Bills, that community,
they'll still have fans.
They're not going to abandon that team. They are crazy for the
You
Buffalo
ever been
Bills.
to Buffalo? Oh, I'm gonna get so much hate mail.
Oh my god, I've been there. I stayed there 4 years. But what you're telling me then is, let's say, 20 years from now.
Eventually.
20 years from now,
Yes.
a lot of these MLS teams will have been around for 40 years, for some of them 45 years, close to 50, what you're saying. So then we can implement promotion relegation then? Would it work then? Because based on what you're saying, the culture would embrace it.
If MLS eventually became a very popular sport in this country, then yes, I
It
think they
already is
might
popular.
embrace it.
It is popular.
But is it in the top 4 right now?
No.
It's not
I
that
don't.
popular.
Yeah, that
It's not
doesn't
that
bother me.
popular.
Like the popularity of it. Like I don't. In my world,
It
soccer's
needs to
number
be.
one, right? Like in my world, soccer's number one. We don't, Daniel, like you, we don't have options. Like you were born into being a Barcelona fan and to kick a round ball. That was about the extent of the sports that we were choosing right?
I was born into
Yeah.
a soccer family. My father's Colombian. My parents are Colombian.
Yeah.
I was born into soccer, but I lived in New York, and basketball is and baseball are king over there. So
baseball.
I went to the Yankees at 4 years old. I went to a Knicks game at 5 years old. I became a Jets fan. I didn't have a club per se, Deportivo Pereira, but there was in the second division, and they got lost to Palmeiras in Copa Libertadores last year. By the way,
Everyone loses Palmeiras these days. Everyone.
But I grew up a little different from you guys, where I had love for soccer, but I grew up loving other things at the same time. And I grew up a diehard fan of 5 different sports teams and 5 different sports. So it's a little different for me because I've shared my interest in so many places that I understand the casual fan that isn't a diehard. And I get that it's going to be hard to get those people to fall in love with the sport if you're giving them what you're calling the minor leagues. Like that's your local team. They're in the minor leagues. Maybe one day they'll get to the major leagues, but right now they're in the minor leagues. I know that some hardcore soccer fans are into that, but a lot of the casual fans are not. And I think that's ultimately why I think that it won't help grow the sport.
Okay, so we hit 1 hour of the episode, so I'm going to end it here. Everyone watching this, let us know your thoughts on the last episode that I did for promotion relegation. Some of you were against it, some of you were for it. Now you've guys heard opinions from people that have a different perspective when compared to mine. Let us know in the comment section down below. Are you for it? If you are, explain how it could work. Are you against it? If yes, and you have anything extra to add besides what Daniel and Paul said, let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to follow both of them on Twitter, YouTube. They have a YouTube channel, Twitter account. The handle is on screen, so you guys can go search it yourself. Thank you for watching, everyone. Drop a like before you go, and have a great day. Bye-bye.